You guys want to hear some quotes from Stefon Diggs talking about his departure from the Buffalo Bills?
Yes.
Which we've never really gotten any clarity on. So
yes, please.
He spoke
please.
with GQ Sports recently, and he just talked about
Not Vogue.
No, GQ.
Oh boy! I didn't realize, by the way, there's a GQ Sports. So there's GQ and GQ Sports now.
I guess. I don't know. I mean,
it's like TMZ.
That's hey, nice shoes though. But he spoke. He spoke with GQ Sports recently, and just talked about his mental space. He was not in a great mental space at the end of last year, but then got specific about just what happened in Buffalo as far as a game plan standpoint went, and said, quote, "The games looked a lot different," Diggs said, of the final 13 weeks of the season. "You can blame me. I don't mind blaming me. I got big-ass shoulders, but pay attention, pay real close attention. Watch the game. Of course, there's plenty of plays I want back, but there's a lot of plays that didn't go my way. I need a lot of things to go my way to get the ball. You can't roll out of bed and get 800 yards in the first 8 games. Your best receiver's doing that. You tell me about the last 10. What changed? Were there changes going on? I just pay attention to what really happened and not what people try to act like happened. Like for the last 10 games, I forgot how to effing play football," when talking about his Hall of Fame bid. Quote, "I pay real close attention. This bleep is not a game to me," end quote. So kind of started to take responsibility and then sort of pushed it off. I'm not sure I want this anymore, so let me go ahead and push it off and be honest about how things went. And maybe now it makes sense why they swallowed as much money as they did just to move on from him and just focus on this year without him.
All right, but it's that time of year, folks. It is time for Fact Check. That's right. We don't just do it in politics. We do it in sports, too.
Bam.
Here's what we got, Johnson. Stefon Diggs is right. From week 9 on last season, obviously his yardage total was down, but it was also his targets were down significantly, in fact. If you look at the first 8 games, there was 6 different games. He was targeted double digits or more. From week 9 to week 17, he was only targeted twice. And that's 11 times, too. In back-to-back weeks, week 12, week 13 versus Philly and Kansas City, 11 times. But he never went over 100 yards receiving the rest of the season. And that includes the playoffs. And this is after going over 100 yards for 4 straight weeks, really 5 out of 6 to start the season.
How far off was he?
How far off was who?
How far off was he on those 100 yards, like in those games? Was he close?
Significantly. In fact, the only game that he really got close to 100 yards would have been week 9 at Cincinnati, had 86. And then week 17 at Miami, he had 87. I mean, there were weeks where he didn't even go over 50 yards receiving.
Is it attributed to the targets? Is it attributed to the defense? If you're having a good year,
Kansas City obviously had a good game plan against, if you remember the Week 13 matchup last year's tight game, KC won in KC 2017, but they did a good job against him. I mean, he was targeted about 11 times, only had 4 catches for 24 yards. And look, here's what we don't know. Ken Dorsey was the offensive coordinator. He was dismissed. They bring in Joe Brady. Joe Brady then takes over. We don't know if Joe Brady looked at this offense and said, hey, I'm going to try to spread the football around. Stefon, we've been trying to get you the football down the field. We're going to try to get the ball in your hands quicker. Or in some cases, we're going to highlight some other pieces. You don't know what the philosophy was, but I think the writing's on the wall. It was a disconnect between Ken Dorsey and how he viewed Stefon Diggs and Joe Brady. And the one thing I will say to you about Ken Dorsey that I know for a fact is, he came out of Miami, and during his time in Miami, he was coached by a guy named Rob Chudzinski. Rob Chudzinski ended up being my offensive coordinator for the first 2 years in Cleveland. Brilliant offensive mind. I love Chud to this day. Really, really great scheme and play caller.
Hey, Chud.
And Ken was a part of our team those 2 years. And one of the things that Chud would always preach is think playmakers, not plays. Because a guy like Kellen Winslow, a guy like Braylon Edwards will go up and make a play regardless of what the coverage is, regardless of what, just think playmakers. And if you look at the first 8 weeks of Buffalo last year, Ken Dorsey's calling those games and probably coaching Josh Allen with that exact thought in mind. Think playmakers, not plays, because Diggs was targeted significantly more than after that point in week 9 moving forward. So it is a bit interesting to think about whether it's Sean McDermott's call, who knows how involved he gets in the offense, or Joe Brady. But it does feel like there's a disconnect there for sure.
How did the team do, Q? How did they finish out?
That was going to be my point. They were better.
They were better. Okay, so if they were better, then that's why obviously you feel comfortable getting rid of them. But let me ask you this.
Let me put it this way, because that's not technically true.
Okay, so go ahead.
The first 4 weeks, they were actually 1-3. So it wasn't until how they finished the season winning 5 straight where they improved. But initially, when he talks about the disconnect between week 8 to week 9, they actually struggled mightily.
Did they, in any estimation, did they benefit from Stefon Diggs being on the field as almost like a decoy? Does it make, because if you're like, okay, we can have success, we don't have to target them, we can get rid of them. Do you lose the element that you had being able to target the other players that you were targeting, using the other players you were using, because you had the benefit of the defense is still game planning Stefon Diggs, and now you don't have that this year? Is it safe to say that that's a possibility of how this plays out?
Maybe. I mean, looking at the snap percentage, and I have to kind of do the math here in order to get this done, but his average offensive snap percentage was higher, I think, looking over these stats. And that's probably not by a ton, but it does look like it was higher, because there was weeks like in 14 and 15 where he played 46% of the snaps, 60% of the snaps. He didn't play less than 66% of the snaps for any one game in the first 8 weeks. So it does seem like there was even times when he wasn't even on the field as much.
And also it felt like they were going, like there was a little bit more of a thought to give Gabe Davis opportunities. Khalil Shakir had a big game, a couple of big games there. Dalton Kincaid started to come alive. It just, like, I wonder though this, if based on what they have to fork up, like $35 million they had to eat to get rid of him this year, going into the final year of his deal, like, how bad was it behind the scenes that if it's all about playmakers and not plays, and you're looking at a guy who's got the talent and the ability that he is, because like when he talks about the Hall of Fame, like he's got a shot, like there's a chance he could be a Hall of Fame player. How do you not make that work? Like, you got 1 year left. It's going to be cheaper, theoretically, than it is to keep him than it would be to part with him. Like, how bad must it have been to where they just had to get rid of it? Like, and Pete Prisco's made the point a couple of times, addition by subtraction. But damn, he's a good player. Like, and Gabe Davis is gone. Like they're looking for pieces there. That's why they drafted Keon Coleman. I just wonder, what the hell went wrong behind the scenes that they couldn't make that work at least one more year?
It had to be the locker room, if you ask me. It had to be him poisoning the like his way may have been a turnoff, because it's come out in the media at times. Listen, I know Stefon Diggs personally. He's not a bad dude at all. He's a cool dude to be around. If you know him, he's like super cool cat. The whole family, super cool people. So I would say he's very passionate about what he does. And that came across in his quote. He's very passionate. He cares about his reputation. He cares about his performances. He cares a ton about what goes on and how it plays out. So I would think that because he has it's almost like, and I'll say it's not a complete comparison. I won't say it's a comparison, but what I will say is it could be something like what happened with what was the receiver that went to Arizona from Houston? DeAndre Hopkins, right? It could be a situation where he's disgruntled, speaking of Diggs, he was disgruntled based upon what his targets were and his involvement in the offense, but his influence over the locker room is significant. It's significant. So if you have disgruntled and you have significant influence in the locker room, that's a horrible combination if you're a coach, right?
And
Go ahead.
Sorry,
go.
I was going to say, just to get the timing right of when everything transpired, because, for Diggs, he talks about week 8 and then after week 8. The change didn't happen from offensive coordinator until after their 10th game of the season. So after week 10, which they did, to Jonas's point earlier, they improved with the change to Joe Brady. How much of that honestly had to do with the, change in coordinator and all that. Maybe that's what you attribute it to. I don't know. But if you started tracking them from week 11 moving forward, yes, they only lost one game the rest of the season. However, Diggs, for whatever reason, seems to be pointing to week 8, which is where he can see his, targets, everything else drop significantly.
Which he was upset the year before, wasn't he? Like, right. He was upset going out of the year before. So do we pinpoint it and say it's because they got rid of one coordinator and brought in a new one? Because he was bothered leaving the playoffs. Was that the year before?
No, that was the year before this past year, or the offseason before this past year was when he left training camp. Remember?
Right.
Going into the year.
Can I throw out a theory? Can I just throw out this quick theory? Because like LaVar, every time I've been around Stefon Diggs, he's been a really nice guy. He's been awesome. And I'm going to chalk this up to the fact that, I don't know, he's human. Like, we're competitors, dude. We're athletes. There's going to be emotions involved. Like, when you're not getting the football, you're probably going to be frustrated when you feel like you're one of the best receivers in the NFL, right?
Yeah.
And you have a quarterback who's capable. So it's not even like, it's not because the quarterback's not capable. He's capable, but they're not getting you the football. And so that can be frustrating. Like, it's human nature to be able to say, like, things aren't going well. I could help this football team out. And it's probably frustrating for him to have to deal with some of that. And so we tend to look at wide receivers. We see glimpses on the sidelines and all that. Like, maybe it wasn't that bad behind the scenes. Who knows? Maybe it was his representation. Like, there's so many things you don't know what caused this. And, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter, I guess. I mean, he's moved on. The Bills have moved on. We'll see who gets the better end of that as the Texans look loaded and the Bills kind of feel like they're in reload mode. Maybe not. But, like, we always have to make so much of the reactions of players on the sidelines and their emotions. And it's like, dude, it's football. Like, what do you expect? Yeah. He's frustrated. He's mad. Like, there's so much time that goes into this. So that's the hard part for me is we tend to sensationalize, this small snapshot. And we tend to, make a story about one moment in someone's life and make it about that. And it's like, well, maybe he's just frustrated. There was a bunch of other guys who were probably frustrated that didn't have the camera on at that moment either.